Southeastern Bow Hunter Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Southeastern Bow Hunter Podcast. This episode, we're going to have Mr. Lindsay Thomas back on to talk about, unfortunately, we have CWD in Georgia now. So we're going to be talking about everything CWD, what it is, where it came from, and what we can expect to see in Georgia going forward now that we have it confirmed to be in the state. My opinion on CWD is probably a little different than most people, but I'm open to, the experts' facts and statements and all that stuff. So I reached out to him and said, hey, man, can we get you back on and do an episode and really sort of figure out like what exactly is going on. So it's going to be a great episode. I have some really, really big news for you guys. If you're watching the video, you can see that behind me, my bear is no longer there. We have made an amazing partnership recently. Those who know me already know about it, but we have partnered up with G5 and Prime Archery. Brian came on the podcast. It was an amazing podcast, and I told him, hey, I really want to work with you guys. What do we need to do to make that happen? We were able to make it happen. So I am going to be shooting the new Prime form this year for 2025. Haven't gotten it yet, but working on that. And it's actually going to be in, I think it's called Ghost Gray, but it's going to have Osseo pattern limbs. So I'm extremely excited about that. I'm also going to be shooting the, honestly, probably 3 different broadheads. I'm going to be doing some testing on hogs this summer. I'm going to be shooting for sure the G5 Mega Meat during deer season, probably the Dead Meat V2, and I'm going to test the T2 on some hogs as well. And I'm just going to pretty much decide, which of those 3 I want to use. I'm kind of biased towards the Mega Meat for those who have listened to me talk about this. That specific broadhead, I'm a huge fan of it. But very thankful, very, very thankful to be now working with Prime Archery and G5 Outdoors. So from here on out, it's nothing but Prime and nothing but G5, baby. So that's amazing. Give all the glory to God for that. And it's really good to be working now with another Christian company. Another big thing is a little hint. There's some things in the work with Southeastern Bow Hunter and Bohning. If you know what Bohning is, it is Bohning Archery. It is the vein company that has been around, as far as I know, the longest. It's 80 years. We've got some stuff coming for that. So keep an eye out. Once everything is solidified, I will let you guys know. I talked with Brad today, and he said, go ahead, let your listeners know that some stuff's in the works. And as soon as everything's solidified, I will have all of the news for you guys. So 2 new partners. Very, very excited about that. Cannot wait to see what that new Prime form looks like in person, especially in Osseo gear, and then get to start testing out those broadheads. G5 has, in my opinion, is pretty much at the top of the broadhead game. I know I used to shoot different broadheads, but the opportunity, arose, and I'm not going to pass that up, especially with that specific company. So thank you, G5. Thank you, Prime. Thank you, Brian. And also thank you, Brad and Bohning, for believing in me as I believe in you guys. And I cannot wait to see where this goes. So if you want to get, some awesome broadheads, check out G5. They have all the fixed blades. They have all the mechanicals that you would ever need. They have 3 blade mechanicals, obviously the Mega Meat and Dead Meat V2. Then they've got the T2, which is a 2-blade mechanical that just came out. That was John Dudley helped design that. And if you're a fixed blade guy, they have the Montec M5, and they also have the Striker and the Striker X. So amazing stuff, super sharp broadheads. They have everything covered that you need there. And then if you're in the market for a new bow, I highly recommend you check out the new form. I shot it. It's by far the best shooting bow I've ever shot. Super stable, super smooth. And Prime also offers basically a comfort mod and a speed mod. With the speed mod, you get an extra 7 foot a second. And I just really like that Prime is innovating pretty much all across the board when it comes to their bows. And if you don't want to get the form, they also have the RVX Plus 32 and 34. So go check that stuff out. Now on to the rest of the partners. So obviously Working Class Bow Hunter, me and Kurt had a very long discussion about some stuff last week that you guys are going to start seeing some changes and seeing some things that I think is going to be very beneficial. Very, very thankful to be working with Working Class Bow Hunter. If you want to go get some merchandise like this hat or a shirt or a beer koozie or any of that, go to workingclassbowhunter.com and use the code SEBH15 to save you 15%. Okay. That's on all merchandise, and their stuff is top quality. Next up is going to be the Bowtique. So me and Michael have been talking a lot lately, and that's actually kind of how the boning thing came along. So the Bowtique is now partnered up with a couple other guys. Excuse me. I know Cage over at Ruthless Archery, Trent Crumpler from Chest Thumper Outdoors. Gosh, who else? I can't remember who else it is, but it's a whole group of guys that have now partnered up with Bohning, and that is how the whole boning thing kind of came about. The Bowtique is, in my opinion, your go-to for custom arrow wraps and arrow builds. They now are using strictly boning vanes. They got the new Alpha and the new Atlas, which is honestly what I plan on running. I'm working on this build with Michael over at the Boutique and Boning and Victory, trying to get some HLRs built for the 2025 season with some Boutique wraps and some boning vanes. Very excited about that. So please go to the boutique.com, boutiquellc.com, and go get you a custom order. I know I talked to him today, and I don't know what's going on. Y'all go get your arrows looking right, okay? He can literally make you any wrap that you want, any custom order that you want. You can send him an email, you can place the order online, and you guys can discuss it, and he can get you that custom order made, and it will be better, top notch than anything else you've ever used. Or send him your arrows and tell him, hey man, go crazy, and you will be impressed, I promise. So when you do that, when you go to the boutiquellc.com and either pick out pre-made designs or you pick out a custom order from Michael, use the code SEBHP to get free shipping. Use that code, okay? Use that code. These codes are for you to use and save money. Next up is going to be Osseo gear. I told Joe about what was going on with Prime and G5, and he was ecstatic. So that was really exciting. And when I told him that I was going to get one of the two new bows in Osseo, he was even more ecstatic. So really good to see, mutual partners get excited about stuff like that. And, you guys know me, I'm a huge Osseo fan. Osseo, in my opinion, is one of the best camo companies out there. I used it all last season. It was amazing. It really blends in well with everything. And I know there's a lot of new merchandise new stuff that they're making that is going to be dropping this year. And I'm very excited for you guys to see that. I'm excited to use it. And I really think if you guys just go to osseogear.com, look at all the stuff they have to offer, keep your eyes out for the new stuff, use the code SEBH, and that will save you 15%. That is site wide. Okay. So you can use that code, save 15% off whatever it is, whether you're getting a hat, some gloves, a shirt, or an entire setup with your jacket, your shirts, your base layers, your pants, all of that. So yeah, go to osseogear.com, use that code SEBH, save 15%. Next up is going to be Summit tree stands. It's really sad just seeing my climber kind of sit there. I do have to bring it back inside and set it up for the off season. But I do plan on getting some more stuff from Summit and using some of their hang-on equipment this year. Really excited about that. Very thankful to be working with Summit. You guys have been killing that code. Okay. So that code that I've had for the past 2 years, SEBH15, keep using it because you're saving 15% on your orders. And, there may be some stuff coming from that down the line, but they've got a whole line of new accessories that's going to be very beneficial to all of us bow hunters. And I'm just very, very thankful that Summit's been with us almost since the beginning. So go to summitstands.com, look at new tree stands, start getting your gear upgraded, and get some new tree stand cables if you need them. Get a new seat, get a new tree stand. If the one you're using last year was kind of go to Summit, use that code. It'll save you 15%, and you can get a really top quality tree stand for cheaper than you would at any other place. Next up is going to be Scoutek. My Scoutek cameras have been working great. I haven't been feeding, mainly because I've been so busy. We were just in Colorado, and so I was gone for like a whole week, and my Scoutek cameras are working fantastically. So definitely go to scoutek.com and check out all they've got. I actually plan on talking with Ryan in the next couple of days to figure out where we're at with the new cameras. So once I know about that, I'll let you guys know. But I'm very excited to use those cameras and see what else Scoutek has coming for this year. Next up is going to be Ace Hardware and Social Circle. That is where I'm getting my bow completely set up. Once I get the new form, that's actually where I shot the form at and fell in love with it. Ace has you covered. They sell G5, they sell Beast, they sell Prime, Hoyt, all of that stuff. So go to Ace Hardware in Social Circle, go talk with John or Mark or Hunter, whoever's in there, and they will definitely take care of you. Next up is going to be Bergie Bowsmith. So Bergie is, if you don't know, Bergie is a complete bow wizard. This dude knows how to tune a bow, bare shaft out to 15 yards, and it's absolutely crazy because I don't understand how he does that. But he's also a dealer for a lot of our major brands. I should have looked this up earlier. I meant to, but if you go to bergiebowsmith.com, look at all of the stuff he is a dealer for. If he is a dealer for G5 or a dealer for Prime, I'll be honest, I don't think Prime is on there. I think you have to go to your local bow shop to get that, which I highly recommend you do. But if you want to order some stuff online, you don't feel like going somewhere, go to bergiebowsmith.com and check out all of the dealers. If you see G5 on there, use this code SEBH10 and that will save you 10%. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, really want to try the Mega Meat, want to try the T2 or the Dead Meat or any of the stuff the G5 Outdoors offers you, go to Bergie Bowsmith. If you see all of that on there, and I'm going to check that. And so I will be better prepared for this next week. All right. It's been a long week getting back from Colorado and sort of getting back in the swing of things. But if you go to bergiebowsmith.com and they've got G5 on there, use that code SEBH10 to save you 10%. And you can get those broadheads 10% off. So why not? Next up is going to be Dialed Archery. Scott is coming back on. In a couple weeks, we are going to have Scott Bakken from Dialed Archery back on here to talk to us about the proof and how they went from the Arxos to the proof. I still plan on using my Arxos. I want to get a proof, but I still plan on using the Arxos on my new bow. And honestly, dude, it is the best sight that I've ever used. So I don't see a reason why even to switch. But I do know that the proof is basically the Arxos, but better, right? So it's an updated, much, I'm not going to say much needed, but just things that were adjusted and changed that I don't even think any of us really knew needed to be done. So go to Dialed Archery, check out the new proof, look at all of the ways you can customize it, and go get your sight today. Last but not least is going to be Camo Dust. That's what I use for my scent control. It's the only thing I trust. So go to camodust.com and get you the 6-pack. It'll last you all deer season. If you're going to be hunting this summer, turkey hunting, which turkeys, you don't really need scent control really, but if you're hog hunting this summer, like I'm going to be, Camo Dust is definitely going to be able to get you within range of those hogs, and they won't be able to smell you. Or if they do, they're not going to smell you as well as they would with some of that spray on stuff. So that's all the partners. Thank you again to G5 and Prime. Thank you again to Bohning and to all the other partners that we've had. You guys are all amazing, and I could not do this without you. Before we get started with Lindsay Thomas, because he actually just texted me, I need to talk to you about Jesus Christ. If you guys don't know Jesus, it's something that I've really started feeling is extremely important. I guess if I'm going to get preachy, it's something God wants me to do is talk to you guys about this and just drop it and mention, hey, if you don't know him, if you've got this hole in your heart, go figure out who Jesus is. Who is Jesus to you? That's the question. For me, he's my rock. He's the only reason that I'm able to go through an extremely tough day where everything is falling apart and still have a smile on my face, because I know that he's got me, and there is nothing better than having a relationship with Jesus. So he saved me. He can save you too. We all fall short of the glory of God. We're all still sinners, but because of what he did on the cross, we have hope that, when our time is up here, we can go be with him. And from things that people who have had, near-death experiences and have had just crazy things happen to them, it sounds pretty nice on the other side. So I know a team I play for. Hopefully, if you guys are, whoever's listening is open to it, hopefully you can join that team and get to know Jesus like I know him. Okay, so that's my preacher moment. That's all the partners. Lindsay's waiting on us. So let's get started with this episode with Lindsay Thomas. Dude, it's going to be a good one. What's going on with CWD? Let's figure it out. We got Mr. Lindsay Thomas back on here again. I wish it was under better circumstances. I really do. But we're going to be talking about CWD that is now in Georgia. But before we dive into that, dude, what's been going on? We were talking a little bit before the start of the episode, and it sounds like both of us have been really, really busy with deer season, and I don't know about you, but I kind of feel happy that it's over because I now can breathe and sort of make up a plan for next year. So I mean, how was your season?
Georgia has a long deer season. That is for sure. It was a good one, but like you, I mean, when it gets to the end, I'm a little relieved. It's kind of like, okay, now we can get caught up on some other things. And particularly for me, working for the National Deer Association, deer season is a busy time for us. So
Mhm.
both catch up at work and catch up with personal life as well. But I had a good season. Um, I got a buck on November 2nd at our family land in Southeast Georgia. I think he's 4, maybe 5. I'm sending an incisor tooth off to deerage.com so I can find out. But nice 8 point buck that I had on camera for a couple of years. Got him on November 2nd and then got a doe there toward the end of the season as well, right there in early January. So pretty good
Nice.
season for me,
Okay.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, dude. Way better than what I had to deal with. Chasing one specific deer for 2 months and then he just disappears and shooting three does but only recovering one. It's been one of those years. But
Yeah.
it I don't know. I tell my buddies that when we have years like that, we have to go back and sort of, reevaluate what we were doing. And I had that moment last night because I was deleting some old photos of that deer I was after because I'm pretty much convinced he's dead, right? And I was looking at other photos from a different spot, and I was like, dude, I had like $2 over there at least that are 130s. Why was I not over there? Because we can still bait here and feed them and stuff. You can set it up to catch them going to it or leaving it or whatever. And I was so focused on this one specific deer that was smaller than that. And it just, I don't know. It was just one of those things. So, cool, man. Well, I'm glad to hear you had a great season. Congratulations.
Thank
What
you.
did that buck score? Did you score him?
I haven't measured him yet. He'd probably go 115, somewhere in there.
Solid. Solid.
We're in the coastal plain down there. The best buck ever killed in the county is 151 net. So,
Dang.
if you get into the 120s, you're almost in the top 10 bucks in the county. So, this is not the biggest deer in Georgia. So, 115 to 120 is not a bad 8 pointer where I am
Yeah,
in Wayne
that's a
County.
solid buck.
And a
I'd be
mature
happy with
buck.
it.
He was 4 to 5 years old. I'm going to confirm that for sure. But that's the age we're going for,
Yeah,
and we manage more by age than antler score. So I was happy with him.
awesome. Well, all right. So I guess we're just gonna dive into it. We have CWD in Georgia now, and I honestly am surprised it took this long. I remember when I first figured out what CWD was, I thought we already had it, and then I come to find out we don't. And so I used to brag to my buddies in other states that do have it, like, "Hey, man, our deer are clean and your deer are a little bit dirty, ain't they?" And now, I'm putting my foot in my mouth. So what? For the people who don't know, because it came out, what was it, like 3 weeks ago? They found that deer.
January 23rd was when DNR announced it. The
Okay,
deer was
so
killed back in November, though,
oh
in
wow,
Lanier County, and sampled as part of DNR's CWD surveillance. And what they do is send those samples off, takes a couple weeks to get the results back. And in the case of a positive, they send it off to another lab to get confirmation. You don't ever want to go straight to the news with, oh, with that first test, you confirm.
yeah,
And so it just takes some time to get that confirmed. And finally, then of course, I don't know how many days DNR knew before they announced it, but they had a plan for how they were going to roll that out and announce it in public hearings and everything. So they were careful about how they did this. But it was January 23rd before the news broke.
jeez, man, yeah, I remember seeing that, and I thought it was like an early April Fool's joke. I think it was. I want to say it was Brian over at Georgia Field that posted about it, and I wanted to message him and be like, dude, are you joking right now? Like, is this legit?
Yeah.
And then I started seeing it everywhere, and I don't know. I mean, for those who don't know, what exactly is CWD?
So it is a neurodegenerative syndrome of the central nervous system. Something similar in people would be like Alzheimer's or dementia. It's not a virus, it's not a bacteria. It is a syndrome that leads to cognitive and neuro decline
Mhm.
in the deer. It's caused by a prion, which is a protein. We all have these proteins in our bodies, and deer do too, but sometimes some of them go rogue and become misfolded or misshaped. And when that happens, it's called a prion. That's what a buildup of these prions, which the body can't process in the nervous system, is what leads to deterioration of the brain
Mm,
in deer. And it is 100% fatal. When a deer has this, they are going to die. Now, it takes a year to 2 years to kill the deer outright. In other words, before you look at the deer and can say that deer looks sick, it's going to be a year to 2 years. It's very slow progressing.
mm,
But the decline is happening. So they begin to lose their, total awareness and total sharpness before that year to 2 years, reaches that end stage. But it's 100% fatal. It will kill eventually. Many of them die of other things before the CWD actually kills them. For
mhm,
example, they might be shot by hunters. They're walking around in daylight a lot more. They'll be hit by cars. They'll be killed by coyotes because they're dealing with this cognitive decline. So those things often get them in most cases long before they literally drop dead of CWD.
Jeez, man, that I'd hate to be a deer with that. That sounds terrible.
It is
So,
terrible. Yeah,
all right, I have to be honest. My whole opinion on the whole CWD thing is I've heard rumors about like certain DNR, I guess, operations or organizations inflating CWD numbers to get, funding and stuff like that. I'm not involved in it. This is just stuff I'm hearing. But I never really took it serious because we never had it here. And I always kind of brush it off like, all right, well, whatever. When I go to, Illinois or Ohio, if I shoot one, big deal, right? But I think now that it's close to home, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, is because I want to know exactly what we're dealing with, because I've heard, I think Joe Rogan's talked about, I know he's talked about it sometimes. I've heard it on other podcasts many times, but something that some people are worried about is like if you shoot a CWD infected deer, that it could jump to humans, which so far that hasn't happened, right?
that's correct. There's no known case of this disease jumping from deer to humans, through consuming venison. And a lot of evidence that there's a strong species barrier. There's a lot of evidence for that. They've been
Okay, good.
studying this for years, they've done everything from lab experiments to studying populations of hunters in areas where CWD has been around a long time, looking for patterns. And they're not seeing any patterns. So there's a strong, lot of evidence that there's a strong barrier. But because this disease is so unusual and so difficult to understand and so complex, the experts can't say 100% you will never get this. And so
Mhm.
what they say is, hey, if you hunt in a CWD zone, get your deer tested and wait to eat the venison until you get the results back. That's it. It's a precaution to keep your risk at zero if you can. That's all it is. There's no evidence, though, like I said, that anybody's ever been made sick by this, and a lot of evidence that it would be difficult to make a human sick with
Okay,
CWD.
good. Yeah. And that's, again, that's one of those things is like, I've just been stubborn about it. Been like, dude, I'll eat it anyway, because the same thing you just said, like, there's a lot of evidence that says there's a huge species barrier there. And I don't know. It's kind of, it's hard to, in a sense, take it as serious as we probably need to, especially because a lot of Georgia boys are stubborn, right? That's just how we are, and it's one of those deals where it's like, okay, if we're not worried about the humans catching it, we need to be worried about the deer population, either declining or it's spreading rapidly. Because I mean, where did it come from? Where did it originate from? Like, where was the first, I guess, instance of CWD that we know of?
So that we know it, that we discovered as it's currently known was 1967 in some captive research deer in Wyoming. I believe it was mule deer. And at that point, I think it spread from there, got into some wild animals, elk and mule deer in that area, and began to spread that way. I'm not sure the full trajectory, but 2002 was the first year it showed up east of the Mississippi River in
Mm,
Wisconsin. Now we know that, the primary way this disease moves across the landscape is when you put put live deer on wheels that have the disease and transport them around. No doubt that in many cases it reached some of these far-flung areas and states through legal or illegal movements of live captive deer on wheels. In other cases, it's spreading through natural deer movements of sick deer moving into adjacent areas. It may have spread through carcass transportation, where a hunter goes to another state, kills a deer, brings the whole carcass back across state lines, disposes of the carcass, particularly the brain, the spinal column, the organs outside in the woods. Those prions are highly durable in the environment, and healthy deer contacts them that way. So those are the primary ways it moves around. We don't really know, all the different pathways it took and to get to every location it's at. We don't know, for example, how that deer in Georgia got sick. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. We know where it is now. We know we have it there, and we've got to manage it. The one lesson we've learned in all the 35 other states before Georgia that had it, that have been dealing with it, is if you ignore it and you just sit back and monitor it, it spreads, it gets worse, and the deer population eventually begins declining. You have to manage it. And that's the one lesson that we've learned. I want to go back real quick. Couple of things that you said. One, there's so much misinformation about this disease. One of the things that makes people speculate a lot about this is the slow nature of the disease. Like I said, it takes a year to 2 years to show up in a deer for the symptoms to be obvious to someone. And so people who live and hunt in areas where this disease has existed often will say, what's the problem? I don't see it. I never see sick deer. That's right. But that deer that was in the ditch hit by a car had CWD. That deer that was brought down by coyotes was brought down by coyotes because it had CWD. Or deer that you shot that looked completely healthy. Turned out they had CWD. So it's kind of flies under the radar. And that's why a lot of people say they don't see the problem here. It's a very insidious disease that's very sneaky and, like I said, difficult to understand the impact, but it's definitely there. Then the other thing I want to touch on is what you said about the money issue. Yeah, that's another one of the stupid ideas and stories that goes around, is that this is a money grab. Let me just tell you that it's a money losing situation for state agencies when they have to deal with this. The testing costs money to monitor it for it, and we have to do that. Dealing with the problem costs money. We have to deal with it. This is a money losing situation. We'd rather see that money go to public lands and other things, not spent on CWD. And I know so many, I've gotten through my job, gotten to meet so many of the people around the country who manage deer for state agencies, including our own Charlie Killmaster, who's our state deer biologist here in Georgia. These folks are deer hunters. They're passionate about deer. I've been there in many cases at meetings with them when they have to tell the rest of the group, well, my state found it. And you know what? They're heartbroken. This is the worst day in their careers, is when they find out that the state and the deer that they manage, that they personally are responsible for, now have this disease. So this idea that states want this is one of the most ridiculous things anybody can say about this disease.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I struggle a lot with people's conspiracy theories and saying oh, DNR is just saying, because we went through the whole COVID thing and found out a lot of stuff about that. So that's the second I heard that, I was like, oh, you're just taking that idea and putting it on this, and that's again why I wanted to talk to you, because you know what you're talking about. I'm not out here helping test deer, and I mean, I'd like to think that I've learned a lot from doing what I do in the woods, but I don't know what makes a deer tick like that,
And
and
it's a terribly complex disease. This is not a simple thing like a virus where,
exactly.
hey, wash your hands and you'll be all right. Cook the
Mhm.
meat and you'll be okay. It's not like that. It's complex. It's strange. It doesn't operate like health issues that we're used to. And it's difficult to get your mind around it and comprehend how it works. So yeah, it's a tough thing where hunters are concerned, because it takes time to sit down and listen and try to understand what this is.
Yeah. So what is a way to combat it? I mean, I know that some states, and this kind of leads into something I want to talk about a little bit later, but some states, like Illinois, they don't allow baiting, right? Georgia just allowed baiting back in what, 2018, I think it was, for the whole
Yeah, a
state.
while before that. It was in the southern half of the state well before that, and then they went statewide. I don't, yeah, some years
Okay.
ago. I forget which.
So, I mean, like what, because my argument for the whole baiting thing is, I've seen enough deer, especially now over the, course of a few years, that they're going to do deer things, and I've had arguments with, buddies in other states. They're like, oh, well, baiting, helps spread CWD and stuff. And my argument back is, well, even if you didn't bait, they're still going to hit scrapes. They're still going to lick each other's faces. That's just what they do. So I mean, is that like, I mean, really, which side of the fence are you on with that? Because I'm still of the opinion that baiting's not going to hurt. It might potentially, speed up the process, but these deer are still going to be around each other. Like you're never going to stop them from doing that. So I mean, like, is that potentially something we'll see in the future here in Georgia, where they say, "Hey, no more baiting, CWD, we can't do it," or do you think it's? I mean, I'm sure it's way more complicated than that, but to kind of simplify it a bit, I mean, is that maybe something we're going to see in the future that will be discussed? Or
That I don't know. What I know is that right now DNR has stated they're not changing that law.
okay.
Not even in the CWD management zone of Lanier and Berrien County. They've said we're not going to change the baiting laws right now. Now they've put out some recommendations. If you choose to bait, do it this way, with some specific guidelines. What I'll tell you is, as if you're a hunter in or close to a CWD zone, there's a list of actions you should take. If I was one of these hunters in a zone like that, the list of actions I would take, a long list of things you can do to help fight the disease.
Mhm.
Some of the most important ones are: number one, keep hunting, keep harvesting deer, take does, take the right number of does where you hunt, keeping density in balance with the habitat, and so the deer aren't overpopulated will help slow the deer to deer spread of the disease. So keep hunting, keep harvesting deer, and take does. Get your deer tested. That helps the agency understand where the disease is located and how many deer have it. That's two key pieces of information in managing the disease. Don't haul carcasses out of the zone. Don't take those things that might spread prions to other areas outside the area and dispose of them properly. So there's report sick deer when you see them. All of these things are things you can do that help. And yes, I would say on that list, don't bait or feed. We don't recommend that if you hunt in a CWD zone, because the science is very clear that a bait pile or a feed site increases deer to deer interaction, close contact, that these sites tend to accumulate urine, feces, saliva, and these things all transmit CWD prions, and deer concentrate closer and in closer contact at these sites than any other place. So the science is very clear on that. So that's our recommendation. If you want to do the things that help fight CWD, where, if you hunt in a CWD zone, on the list is it's not a good idea to feed or bait. Now, if
Interesting.
it's legal and you want to make that choice, it's up to you, but it's not a great idea. It's a great way to help increase the spread, the deer to deer spread. And, food plots and white oaks, things like that, don't work exactly the same way as a bait site where, it's very concentrated. Deer, you see where the ground gets chopped around these areas from deer, just, heavy concentrations of deer in one site.
Hmm.
Food plot is different. A deer is biting off forage above ground level, and taking that forage and consuming it. They're not down in the dirt where the urine and the feces is, like in some cases with some types of baiting and feed sites. So, it's the science is clear that is a higher risk at a bait or feed site of spreading CWD than a food plot or than acorns on the ground. Is the risk at those other sites? Is there risk also? Yes, there is, but it's higher at a bait or feed site. So that's why we say among the actions to take to help if you hunt in one of these zones, not feeding or baiting is a good idea.
Gotcha. Okay. I did not know that it was also transmitted through, their feces and urine and all that stuff.
Yes.
That it's funny you even say that because you know, I hate to admit it, I've stepped in my fair share of buck poop before going to check cameras and scrapes and all that stuff. So I can definitely see how that happens. Um, Man, that's wild. That is so wild. So I mean, is there a way to, get rid of it? I mean, is there anything other than just killing all the deer that have it and, either burning the bodies, or which I hate even saying because that's a huge waste of, a food source. But is there anything that we could do to sort of, you know, I guess in a sense, try to get rid of it? Or is it just there and now here we
Well,
go?
in the big picture, um, the first thing is to slow the spread, stop it from spreading to new areas if possible. Now, Georgia has found it, so we didn't stop it, we got it. But the second most important thing is to catch it early in new areas. If we come to find through additional testing that that was the only deer in that area we can find that had CWD, that's going to be great news.
Yeah.
Or if there's only two or three or whatever, or what you want to find is low prevalence. Um, in Florida, they found it 2 years ago in the Florida Panhandle. They've
Hmm.
tested, I don't know, almost 1,500 deer in those counties since then and haven't found another positive deer yet. That's a
Wow.
very good sign. It shows that apparently in that location, if the disease is there, it's at very low prevalence. We hope that's what we found in Georgia. We won't know for a little while until some more testing comes in. But if you find it early, then the trick is keep that prevalence at a low rate. Let's say there's 1% or less of deer in that area have the disease. That's good. We want to keep it at that. If you can keep it low prevalence, you've got a deer population that is completely healthy for the most part and sustainable, producing healthy fawns. Most deer are living a long life, and they can continue sustaining hunter harvest as well. Only through continuing to harvest deer at a normal level can we keep those prevalence rates low. Now, they have techniques where the state will go in and do what they're calling cluster sampling or targeted removal, where they go in where they know they had a deer that was sick and they take a few more deer right around that area. The goal is just try to get as many sick deer off the landscape as you can, because when sick deer are out there, they're spreading the prions to
Hmm.
other deer. You're not trying to eradicate deer. And in fact, that would be impossible. There's no way that could happen. So no, it's not about eradication. It's about keeping that prevalence rate as low as you can. Because if you can keep that, below 5%, below 3% in the deer population, you'll have hunting and healthy deer for as long as you keep it that way. And that's what this really is about hunters buying time for science to find a better solution. We don't have a solution. We don't have a vaccine. There's no cure. You can hardly destroy the prion. They're durable in the environment for years and remain effective. You can't incinerate them. Cooking venison does not get rid of it. It takes 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit to render a prion protein inert. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
they
well done
are
steak, man.
almost
That's,
indestructible. Interestingly, the one thing we learned, they can go through a coyote's gut and come out the other side still infective. They can go through a crow and it doesn't harm it. But
hmm.
a bobcat and a mountain lion can almost completely digest CWD proteins. So cats
Huh.
are one of the few things we've found that actually can destroy CWD prions.
Interesting.
But the thing, Tennessee found it in West Tennessee, went in and did more testing. Almost half the deer had it. It was too late. It'd been there a long
Wow.
time. Arkansas, same thing. Found it in Northwest Arkansas, went in and did testing. Almost half the deer already had it. It had been there a long time before it was discovered.
Hmm.
So that's what you hope for, is a situation where, you find it early. And that's what I hope we did with Georgia. Because if you find it early, you can keep those prevalence rates low and continue to maintain healthy deer.
Do you think it's possible that environmentally that maybe where we're at, like you were talking about Florida, do you think environmentally it's possible that maybe our deer are just less susceptible to it in some I mean, I'm totally spitballing here, but it's kind of interesting how, Florida had some cases and then after 1,500 deer, which isn't, I'm sure in Florida that's like a fraction of the population, right? But still you would think that they would at least found one and they didn't find any, especially if it was in the
Well,
CWD zone.
yeah, I mean, that deer, like in Florida, just like the Georgia deer, probably did not just spontaneously uh, come down with CWD. It came
Hmm.
from somewhere. Either someone in the past illegally transported some live deer in and released them, or some carcasses were dumped that were CWD positive from some other area, or possibly there's a population somewhere nearby, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, that hasn't been discovered where CWD exists, and a deer naturally moved from that area to these other areas. It could be natural deer movements. We don't really know. Yeah, that's what you have to find out through the testing. How did it get,
Interesting.
how many deer there have it? We may never discover how it got there.
Yeah.
Um, particularly in cases where illegal movements of live deer in the past, that's past history, and who knows whether anybody will ever learn that that's how CWD got to certain areas. But there's no doubt that's been the case in some areas.
Huh. It's just you're blowing my mind right now. To be honest, I'm over here thinking it's like, kind of like how COVID was, where you if you're in sunlight, it won't spread. But then if you're in a, tight space or whatever, because I mean, it does kind of seem like that. It seems like the deer version of that. And it's just, it's crazy that it really is, first off, that difficult to get rid of, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want a 1200-degree cooked steak.
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit too well done for my taste. But it just concerns me, right? Because we all love to deer hunt. I hate. I mean, I'll tell you a story that happened last summer. So I went to the gas station, just doing my own thing, and left to I forget where I was going. I was going somewhere, and I saw this buck. It was still in velvet, one antler. Honestly, a nice buck. If he had both sides, it would have been solid. He was sitting on the side of the road, and he when he came out, he I thought I was going to hit him because he came running out of the woods, backtracked, and then like kind of fell over on the side of the road. So then I turn around and drive past him, and I see this giant gash on him, and I was like, "Oh, well, that's weird," because he just came running out of the woods. What happened? Right? There was no coyotes. It was July, so there was no hunting. And I called one of my buddies at DNR, and I was like, "Hey, dude, this deer, I almost just hit this deer. He's sitting on the side of the road. He's bedded up. Got probably like a 14-inch gash on his back. His back legs look broken. I mean, the whole thing was just totally messed up. And like, I'm very sympathetic towards that. Yeah, I hunt, but I don't like seeing wounded deer. I don't like wounding deer. Unfortunately, I did it twice this year, and I'm not proud of it. But it happens. You bow hunt long enough, it's going to happen. But I bring it up because it's one of those things that I feel sympathy for the deer. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because now I feel like, okay, I need to start trying to do whatever I can to prevent it from either getting here, or if it is already here and we don't know, keep the numbers down. Like, I haven't baited in over a month. I just, mainly it's because of time, and I'm trying to save a little money here and there. But now hearing this, it's like, I may not, I mean, I want to get them through and give them as much protein as I can. But I mean, a lot of the places I hunt, there's plenty of food sources, you know? So yeah, I mean, you definitely got me feeling now like extremely sympathetic towards them because I don't like seeing animals suffer, especially deer.
No,
Um,
it's a bad situation, and yeah, it makes me very sad to think that, we have it in Georgia, or that one day it might spread. I mean, my family's land is about 70, 75 miles from the county where it was discovered.
mm,
So, if it spreads and grows, there probably will come a day when we have it, where I hunt. But it's just that everybody has to remember that it's not the end of the world. It's not going to be the end of the world for deer in those counties. It's not going to be the end of hunting. Um, There's a cat
sorry.
getting in the picture.
Little cameo there. I like that.
It's not going to be the end of the world, especially if we stay engaged as hunters. That's the most critical thing. And it's a lesson we've learned. I hate calling out Wisconsin because I feel bad for their situation, but unfortunately, they serve as a great example for the rest of us. When they found it in 2002, it was early in this whole thing. We didn't know as much as we know now about CWD. They weren't sure how to deal with it. The state wanted to come in and begin to try to, increasing deer harvest,
Mhm.
again, to try to get sick deer off the landscape. Well, the political forces of the time looked at the situation. Some hunters were very opposed. Politics got involved, and they stopped the agency from actively managing CWD. They said you can monitor it, but you may not manage it. All you can do is test deer to see where it is and how much there is. And basically, what has happened since then, over the 20 years since then, is it has spread across almost the entire state. It
Mhm.
has gotten worse and worse in those original counties. There's new data coming out from science done on deer survival in those areas. You got 4 counties in southwest Wisconsin that are all testing over 30% CWD positivity rates, 30% county-wide. You go into some of the localized areas within those counties, and you've got 60% of the bucks testing positive.
Wow.
So it's just, I know people who hunt in those zones. A friend of mine, Paul, whose family owns some land there in that southwest Wisconsin core area, who, he told me 8 of the last 11 deer he's killed tested positive for CWD. They regularly see sick deer. So that's what can happen when you stand back and don't do anything. When you stand back and go, we're just going to monitor this and not attempt to manage it, it's just going to, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Now it's slow, it's taken years for them to reach that situation, But that it also shows that you can maintain deer health for many years, if not decades, if you take action. And all it is simply continuing to hunt and continuing to harvest deer and make sure that deer numbers don't overpopulate and that you do the practices that help slow the deer to deer spread of the disease, taking the right number of does, getting your deer tested. All of these things, continuing to participate as hunters contribute. So anybody who says, particularly here in Georgia, that, oh, we got CWD, we just need to quit hunting or not cooperate with the DNR or whatever, that's the wrong thing to do. You're just
Mhm.
shooting yourself in the foot. Becoming more engaged as a hunter, listening to DNR, learning as much as you can about this, and assisting where you can with hunting and harvesting and testing and reporting sick deer and carcass transportation and these other things that we need to do. That's how we keep deer healthy now that we've got this disease. So, yeah, unfortunately, Wisconsin has shown us the example of what not to do, and that is tune out and not try to manage the disease, ignore it and pretend it doesn't have an impact.
Yeah, I mean that to me, just in any general sense of a disease, whether it's for humans or animals or whatever, that's in my opinion kind of stupid just to be like, all right, well, let's just watch it. Let's just see what happens. I mean, imagine if we did that with, COVID or the flu or whatever. I mean, things would be so much worse.
Yeah.
So when you
I
say
saw a
transportation,
quote from a CWD expert here in the last day or two in an article. I thought it was great, and he said, in talking about Wisconsin, he said, when you're not shooting deer, you're not shooting the sick deer either, and they are surviving, and they are
Mhm.
staying out there, and they are spreading the disease more. So when you make these efforts that the DNR knows how to do, when they test and they find where the deer are, to go in there with hunter assistance, with landowner assistance, they're letting, in many cases, this what they're calling the sampling, the cluster sampling. They're letting hunters do that. They're letting landowners do that. Then they're testing the deer.
Hmm.
So, when you don't do that, you're not removing sick deer. And we know how to do that. We know how to keep the prevalence rate low by removing those sick deer. So shooting, hunting, that removes sick deer and removes them faster than CWD will. So
So with that, like when say someone, one of my buddies wants to come down here and hunt whitetails on public land or go to one of my spots or whatever, and he kills a buck and he has to bring it back. Let's just say to Michigan. Is it you have to go by both states' laws, or is it you go by your home state's law? I mean, how does that all work? Because I'm planning on going to Ohio next year, hopefully. I'm definitely planning on going to Colorado in 2 years. So I'm gonna need to know this.
yeah.
And I mean, what do you do?
So almost all states now have a carcass transportation ban, carcass importation ban.
Okay.
Georgia does, Michigan does. If you drove from Georgia to Michigan with a deer carcass in the back of your truck, you're violating a whole bunch of state laws,
Mm,
right? Most of them have now aligned most of those rules. The whole point is to prevent the importation of CWD into new states or new
mhm.
areas. Um, so basically, you're safe if you cross state lines with only boned out venison, antlers, and if you got a skull plate or a skull attached to it, no brain material or any tissue of any kind, no eyeballs, they're totally clean.
Got it.
You can take a hide if that's been cleaned and scraped as well, and you can take completed taxidermy. But anything else, brain, spinal cord, organs, boned in meat, any of that is illegal to cross state lines. So whether you're coming from Georgia going somewhere else or coming from somewhere else back to Georgia, it doesn't matter. Don't cross state lines with whole deer carcasses. And
Interesting.
now that in Georgia we've got this CWD management zone, which will be Berrien and Lanier counties, if you hunt in those zones, do not leave those counties with a deer carcass. Now, DNR will be explaining all of that before we get to a new deer season. In fact, they're holding public hearings this week.
Oh,
In fact, Thursday night, today's Wednesday, tomorrow night, there's a Facebook Live on DNR's Facebook page that anybody can attend to talk about this. So it'd be a good idea, to sit in on that. But before deer season gets here again, they'll have a lot of guidelines set up on this. They'll probably have places for hunters in those two counties to dispose of deer carcasses. Bring your deer carcass here to dispose of it, so we make sure we do it, properly. Bring
mhm.
your deer here to these locations to have them tested. Or here's a refrigerated drop box for you to drop off samples. All that infrastructure will be set up by the time we get to a new deer season. But yeah, I can tell you one thing you don't need to do hunting in those two counties this fall is leave those counties with a whole deer carcass.
Gotcha. So basically, you if you go hunt in those counties, you just need to debone it, pretty much do a Euro mount, and then figure out a way to get the. So when you were talking about the hide, like, are you talking about get
Unless
it?
there's a taxidermist or processor within those counties, and usually there are, and there'll be someone, that you can take it to, to have it processed or to have it
Mhm.
mounted or whatever. Now, in terms of taxidermy, you know, if your favorite taxidermist is 6 counties away, that's okay. Again, bone out the meat, cape the deer, keep the hide, cut off the skull plate, make sure there's no
Mhm.
brain tissue attached to it, and you're ready to roll. Head to your
Oh, okay.
taxidermist. That's all they need is the cape, the skull plate, and that's it to mount your deer.
Oh,
So
so that's not even. See, I was thinking it was some sort of complicated whole thing. So I could, if it spreads, God forbid, but if it spreads, up here by us, and we, because I'm assuming you probably have a processor, a taxidermist near your house or wherever you're hunting at. I know. I mean, my guy's like 20 minutes away, right? And all of my spots are within 10 minutes. Well, okay, one of them's within 20 minutes, but regardless, if I kill a deer at one of those spots, I basically just do the same thing I've been doing, take it to him, and I don't even have to worry about it. As far as, and if I want to get it tested, I'm sure I have to tell him, like, hey, can you test it or anything like that. But for the guys who don't use that, all they've got to do is just debone it, make sure there's no brain matter, take the cape and everything to their taxidermist, then they're good. The question
if
is,
yeah, if you're talking about if they hunt in those counties, if you hunt in
well,
the
yeah, I'm
CWD zone,
hypothetically saying, like, in the future, if it spreads.
anytime, yeah, that you're hunting in a
Yeah.
zone where it's known to have CWD and deer, yeah, those are practices you need to follow. Now, if you're not in one of the, if you're in 157 other Georgia counties that aren't affected that we know of yet,
Mhm.
that doesn't apply.
Yeah, yeah. If and all basically this whole, I guess, premise of my question is like purely hypothetical because we're not there yet. Hopefully, we never get there. But if we did, if we kind of became like, say, something happens and it just spreads like wildfire, what about the guys who don't take it to processors? I mean, what are they? But they don't take it to a processor.
So
Maybe someone lives
So
far
I,
away from
I
one.
don't I don't use a processor. I process my own, for
Oh,
example.
okay. So, I mean,
Um,
how do you dispose of the carcass then?
well, on my family's land. So I'm dressing, hanging the deer, skinning it all there, boning it out, putting it in a cooler, and then driving home with the meat in a cooler. So technically, if let's say the county where my family's land is was CWD positive,
Mhm.
I'd be fine because I'd be leaving the county only with boned out venison and not with any parts that shouldn't be transported. So I'd be disposing of it, probably if we were a CWD county, what I would do is we'd have a hole and we would bury it. What you want to do is make sure that those parts end up somewhere, landfill, buried in a hole, whatever, where no deer, no healthy deer is going to contact that in the future.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'd be good to go since I process my own. Now, if I didn't, I'd either need to find a processor within the county, and there is one that I could then use. Um, yeah, but that's your options.
Would it be possible? Because I know some people are going to listen to this and be like, "Oh, well, if we ever have to do that, I'll just dig a hole in my backyard." And you know, 10 years down the line, say they move or something happens. I mean, deer literally go everywhere, right? But I'm thinking if you bury it and then something starts growing on top of that, will those prions be able to? Because you know how the root system and everything works. Is it possible that they could come back up and then 10 years later you got a deer eating it? I mean, is that a thing, or am I just kind of off the
We
rocker
do
some?
know that plants can uptake the prions through roots. We know that mushrooms, for example, can take them up. Um, so But I think if you're burying it deep enough, and I know that again, DNR is going to be providing guidelines on this
Yeah.
sort of thing, how to dispose of properly. If you bury it, how deep should you bury it? And in the end, if you can't, wherever you are, you can't bury it, you can't haul it somewhere and dispose of it. Let's say you're on public land and you hike in a couple of miles and you're having to quarter and backpack out the meat. You can't bury that or haul it out and dispose of it.
Mhm.
In the end, just leaving it where you killed the deer is fine. That's better than throwing it in a truck and driving two states or two counties away and disposing of it in the woods where maybe deer haven't been exposed to CWD. If you kill a deer that's CWD positive, but you at least just leave the carcass right there where you left it, at least you're not moving those CWD prions somewhere else.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm just speculating here. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think of ideas like.
Hey, look, these are the questions. Everybody starts thinking about these kinds of questions. What if? What about this? And so, yeah, it's a tough situation.
Well, I never
But
thought that I'd.
again, go to, everybody, wherever, no matter what state you hunt in, fall back on your state wildlife agency. They've got this information. You ought to do this anyway. Get to know your local game warden, have them in your
Mhm.
speed dial. Get to know the nearest wildlife biologist in the nearest wildlife agency office, um, for lots of reasons other than the CWD.
Yeah.
But then, get the emails from your state agency. Go to the CWD website. Georgia already has one, georgiawildlife.com/CWD.
Dang, that was
They've got
fast.
lots of FAQs and other information on that page.
Huh.
So, these folks deal with these questions all the time, and so fall back on that resource for information.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be calling my buddy at DNR up at the WMA by my house, and because I have to get with them and talk about or really schedule our third annual bow shoot this year because they've wanted to sort of do that whole thing. So I'm definitely gonna ask them like, hey, what is the plan? Like, what are you guys doing? Are we just gonna stick to shoot as many as we can and try to keep it away? I mean, I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit because it is only one county, it's one deer. But you and I both know, I mean, with how this disease seems to spread, there's probably, unfortunately, another deer that has it at the very least.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it like once it's there, it's there. Now, is it going to spread up north? Hopefully not. Is it going to spread to you? Hopefully not. I mean, I would be pissed if I could, I shoot a really nice buck and then we have to get it tested and it comes back positive because now I can tell you my wife is not going to eat that deer. And so now I've got a whole deer I need to eat. And it's just, it sucks, man. It just sucks.
Look, it does. I know a lot of folks who hunt in areas where, like Wisconsin and other areas where there's a lot of disease, and they have killed positive deer, and it's not a good feeling. But, the thing that I tell people is remember this, you have to look at it as a win. You killed a CWD positive deer. You removed it from the landscape. That's a good thing. That is a good thing. And so when the day comes, if we have it on my family's land, and when, heaven forbid, but should the day come when I kill my first deer and it tests positive for CWD, that's when I'm going to remind myself, I did a good thing. I removed a deer from the landscape that was out there with the disease and spreading it. So that's how we have to see this. Every state that I'm familiar with that has these CWD zones, if you kill a deer that tests positive, you get a bonus tag. You don't lose, it doesn't count against you. It's not like you can't keep hunting. You get
Yeah.
a bonus tag. So that's your trophy. Collect your reward, which is the bonus tag, and get back hunting and go kill another deer because you did a good thing. For managing this disease, you did a great thing. You removed a deer that was sick. That's the way we have to look at this.
Yeah. I mean, I actually thought of that. I was going to bring that up to you and then I forgot. So I'm glad you said it. Is if we get to that point, Georgia needs to do that. And I mean, I've got some thoughts on like stuff that I would like to see, Georgia state wildlife do, like change some things. I don't know if it'd be beneficial or not. It has nothing to do with CWD, but yeah, oh man, this is so much to take in. I'd never thought when I listened to Ted Nugent 3 years ago say, "Oh, CWD is a lie." I never thought I'd be having this conversation. I really didn't.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people that will tell you this is, there's nothing to this and ignore it and it's fake. Talk to the people, like my friend Paul in Wisconsin, who's killed 8 deer out of 11 that tested positive, who's got trail camera videos and sightings of deer that are skin and bones, that have reached the final clinical stage of the disease. So, yeah, unfortunately, in those areas of Wisconsin, it's getting so bad that a lot of hunters are waking up and going, wait, this is real.
Yeah.
This is serious. We don't want to wait till we get to that point. You take it seriously from the start. We have the
Mm.
opportunity here in Georgia, hopefully, to have caught it early, get engaged, get involved, you know, do the things we need to do to help manage the disease, and we'll be okay. Deer will be okay. It won't be
Yeah.
anything to be panicked about or worried about if we stay engaged and manage it.
So for guys like, I'm assuming you've got cameras. I know I've got a bunch of
Yep.
cameras out. What can we look for? Like, what is the telltale sign? Because I know EHD was a thing, which I don't really think we deal with that much in Georgia, but I know I've seen EHD infected deer and like kind of what they look like. What say I get a photo tonight, right? And I see a deer that just is it skin and bones? Like, what are we looking for to be able to say, oh, that might be an infected deer?
Well, the problem with CWD is the vast majority of deer out there, wild deer that have it, look completely normal
Mm,
because of that long incubation period, a year to
mm,
2 years before they look sick. Um, but yes, certainly those that, like I told you, because of the decline, they die of other things
yeah.
at higher rates than healthy deer do before they reach that skin and bone stage. Hit by cars, shot by hunters, eaten by predators. Some of them catch diseases like pneumonia that they normally could fight off. A healthy deer could fight off. So they're dying of other things. But should they reach that final stage, yes, they look emaciated,
Mm,
skinny. You're seeing bones, and they lose their fear of people. They seem disoriented. They may stand there and look around. They may be drooling. They may be walking in circles. It's just strange behavior. Now,
yeah.
there are some clues. Um, I remember talking to, again, another friend in Wisconsin who was seeing a buck on camera come to a little water source 8, 9, 10 times a day during daylight. And this was an adult buck, mature
Yeah.
buck. That's not normal behavior for a
Not at all.
mature buck. He looked healthy otherwise, but to be showing up in front of this camera at this water source, throughout the day, 8, 9, 10 times in a single day, that's
Mhm.
that's not normal. And he said, I bet you, he told his dad, I bet you that deer has CWD. And when they eventually did kill that deer, it did tested positive, but it looked completely healthy. So there are sometimes clues like that that can tip you off that something's not right with a deer, like that. But for the most part, you know, a couple years ago, some friends of ours next door to our land called us and said, we got a deer in the pecan orchard walking in circles, running in circles. It was a nice buck. It scared me to death. I thought, oh boy, here we go. That's
Yeah.
CWD. That I told them call DNR. The DNR biologist came out from the Brunswick office, put the deer down. Turned out it was a brain abscess. Uh,
Mm,
Bucks get brain abscesses sometimes. They fight, they get injuries on their head. Sometimes those become infected, and sometimes they develop abscesses that literally penetrate the skull and affect their brain. That's what that was. So every time you see a deer behaving strangely and running in circles, it's not necessarily CWD.
yeah.
But in every case, when you see that, we should call DNR and report it so that hopefully they can come out and test the deer to find out if it is CWD.
So do you think it would be a little bit like, I'm trying to think of the word, too much or overreactive or something, I guess, along that line for DNR to when they see a dead? Because I saw probably about 15 dead deer on the road today, driving from here to Augusta and back. Um, do you think it'd be too much to ask if they were to pick those deer up and test them to see if maybe, it is further along than we think? Or is that
They're
kind of just,
they're already doing that.
oh, they are? Okay.
In that area, immediate vicinity of that area, they're going to be looking for any deer they can test.
Yeah.
And that's a gimme. That's an easy one. They're dead. They're there in the road if they can get to them in time before they begin to decay. So
Mhm.
yeah, they're going to be testing roadkill deer. They're going to be testing any crop depredation deer that are shot in that county over, by farmers using crop depredation permits. Again, any deer that's going to be killed anyway, they're going to try to test them. And they're also going to be going in, like I said, to on private lands in the vicinity of where the initial buck tested positive and trying to take out a few small clusters of additional deer as close to that location as they can and test them. Again, not coming in and taking out big numbers. They're just trying to get a few more for sampling. So yeah, roadkill deer, they'll definitely be testing and probably be stepping up their sampling of those kinds of deer beyond that initial area as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm happy to hear that they're doing that because I had about 15 deer that I saw today. If they wanted to come pick them up,
Yeah.
they could. I could tell them exactly where.
They've
Um,
been testing. If you look on the website, they've got this information. They've been testing for a lot of years. at a low level, just sampling and surveying, monitoring to try to catch it early if they can.
Hmm.
But in many counties, it's not really a almost every county they've tested deer from, and it's been roadkill. It's been, sometimes they'll go out to deer processors or check stations at WMAs, or taxidermists, wherever anybody are coming with freshly harvested deer and collecting samples for random testing. They've focused on some areas like the Florida border and the Alabama border because we know those states have either captive deer operations or CWD. Um, but yeah, they've been testing for a lot of years at a background level.
Okay, good. I mean, do you think we're going to see any big impacts from this, like regulation changes on public land, or, I mean, we already talked about the baiting thing, but I mean, I know certain, like nose down, their stuff, it has to say CWD certified on there. I mean, do you think it this year, I guess, is there going to be any potential big impacts that you're either aware of or can think of that we'll see, or is it kind of still in the baby stages?
The biggest things will be affecting hunters in those two counties, and
Got it.
it'll be things like, carcass transportation. Even I think testing, testing's not going to be mandatory. It'll be
Mhm.
voluntary. It will be free. And if you hunt in Lanier or Berrien County, I urge those hunters to test every deer they kill this fall. If you they also DNR may also increase testing opportunities for deer for hunters in adjacent counties as well. And if that's the case and you hunt in an adjacent county, again, get your deer tested. I urge you to do that because it helps. It helps DNR discover where the disease is and how many deer have it. And that's, like I said before, those are two key crucial pieces of information. Now, further away, like where I am, we can also get our deer tested by calling the local DNR office. I probably will have to pay for it. We'll know these details as we get closer to hunting season. They
Mhm.
probably won't offer free testing to everybody in the state, but if you just want to test a deer in some other area where you hunt, you can do it. You probably have to pay 30, 40 bucks for the test results, but that will be, available to everybody. For those in the affected area, it's going to be free, and I urge everybody to participate in that.
Gotcha. Do you know if and I guess I probably know the answer to this, but I want to ask you anyway. I know certain feed companies have been starting to make feed that's sort of EHD combative. Is there anything we know of right now that maybe we could, like, some of the guys that are around here, like Attracts, New Tracks, those guys, is there anything they could add in that would be like a preventative, or is this just one of those deals where there's literally nothing we can do except test, kill, and just keep on doing that?
That's right. Slow the spread either from area to area or deer to deer, and keep hunting, keep harvesting deer to keep prevalence rates low among the deer that are out there, a low percentage of sick deer. That's what we can do right now. There's no prevention other than preventing the spread to new areas. There's no way to prevent or help a deer avoid it. Now, there's known that there are some genetic strains of deer that appear to live longer with the disease. They aren't resistant, they aren't
Mhm.
immune, they can still get the disease and it still kills them, but it takes a little bit longer to kill them. So
Hmm.
that's being studied just to see if there's, perhaps that might be able to help us somehow. The problem is that genetic strain of deer is very rare in the wild, which suggests that it's not really a deer that's fit for survival. So it might not be the type of deer we want to propagate. The other thing too is a deer that lives longer is not a great thing. You want it to die sooner, if anything. I
Yeah,
wish CWD killed them as quick as lightning because then, this
maybe
would be
over
a
with.
lot less of a problem. It couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
It's the fact that they live a long time that makes this difficult to deal with. So a deer that survives longer with CWD is not a solution. It's not a help. That, all I can tell you is 2 years ago, I was in Denver at the last CWD symposium,
mhm.
international symposium that was held. And in that room, I saw over 400 scientists, biologists, disease experts from around the country and around the world, all there to share and talk about CWD and deer and share their research. And that was very encouraging to me because I said, good Lord, look at all these experts who agree on the problem, who are working on it, who are studying it. They're studying vaccines. They're studying all kinds of different, they're the ones who discovered that mountain lions can digest CWD prions.
Hmm.
It's that kind of work. There's hundreds of studies going on all the time. And what I realize is I feel certain that one day those people are going to find a solution. And it's my job as a hunter to buy time for them to do that work. That's what we have to do for now. So it's not hopeless. We have to simply see our role as hunters as delaying, buying time, protecting deer populations that have the disease and helping them remain healthy into the future while scientists work for a solution.
Hmm. Well, that makes me hopeful.
Yeah,
One thing
I
I
do
do want
believe
to,
we're going to solve this problem one day. Um, it may mean, unfortunately, that one day in many areas we can't hunt deer anymore because hunting deer is what will drive the population too low if they're also dying, too many of them are dying of CWD.
yeah.
But, it'll take a long time, just as it has in Wisconsin, to get to that point in many areas. And as long as we manage the disease, we can delay that day in most areas. So, yeah.
So one comparison I've heard on other podcasts and stuff like that is that it's kind of like like prions and all of that. That's like mad cow disease, right? Which wasn't there like a big scare of that a while back? What happened
Yes.
with that? I mean, did they find a way to get rid of that in cows, or is it just they sort of killed all the cows that were sick and that was it?
Yeah, because you're talking about a captive animal, livestock. In that was called it's the bovine version basically of
Yeah.
CWD. There's also a version in sheep called scrapie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're species specific. Deer don't get the bovine version, cows
Yeah.
don't get the deer version, sheep don't get, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, because it was a captive animal, livestock animal, they could institute controls like depopulation and et cetera to kind of control that. With us dealing with a wild animal, it's
Way
very,
harder.
yeah,
So they didn't come up with any sort of like, pill or medicine or anything. They just
no,
okay.
no.
Dang. I was
And
really hoping that they
by the
would.
way, there's a human version of this. It's called CJD. And it's a I can't even spell it, but it's Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease is the name of it. It's the human version, and it's always fatal to people. Tends to develop in older people. It's always been around in the background in America at the rate of about 1 in a million people who gets this strange disease. Sometimes it's spontaneous. It literally just seems to appear in people without them having caught it from anywhere, in other words.
Hmm.
But it is also infective like CWD. That's one of the things that experts have watched for in areas where we know hunters are no doubt eating CWD positive deer and have been for years. Are they seeing an elevated level of that human variant in hunters? And again, they're not. But
Okay.
you're talking about a disease that's very rare. It's 1 in a million.
Yeah.
So it may take a long time to show up. That's why, again, they urge caution. So,
I just know one of my buddies one time made a joke about like, oh, if I eat a CWD or that's the start of the zombie apocalypse. I'm like, dude, you shut your mouth. I was like, don't say that because that's one of the few scary movie tropes that I cannot do is zombies. And I'm like, you're gonna make me hate deer hunting, man. Just stop it. Um, awesome, man. Well, I guess before we wrap this up, because this has been very informative, my brain hurts, but in a good way. I do want to ask about like the states that have it, and it might be a redundant question. It might be an extremely simple answer, or it could be something that literally no one knows. I don't know. But the states that have like higher rates of CWD, what are we seeing in big buck development? Are we seeing like smaller racks coming around because they're not living as long? And I mean like as a whole, not just a buck that died at 3.5 and he had a 120-inch rack and his dad had a 170. You know what I mean? Are we seeing like in a general sense the antler size go down, or is it kind of just deer specific and it's not
I
impacting?
don't I don't think anybody's collected that data.
Okay.
We know that bucks tend to contract CWD about twice as frequently as does do. In other words, in these areas, about twice as many bucks will have it as does.
Hmm.
And among bucks, about twice as many mature bucks will have it compared to younger bucks. And this is just part of the buck lifestyle. They cover more ground during the rut. They're roaming, they're interacting, and then in the summer they gang up in bachelor groups of bucks and they live in very close quarters. They groom each other, they hang out very closely together. Then fall comes again and they spread out all over the place.
Yeah.
So that lifestyle just tends to allow them to contact the disease more frequently than a doe does. But um, you know, no, I haven't seen any studies. Obviously, you would think that in the later stages of this disease, this deer is probably not getting adequate nutrition, it's probably
Yeah.
not feeding normally, and that, of course, is going to, yeah, affect if that deer lives long enough to grow another set of antlers next
Yeah.
year, you're probably talking about an impact. Uh, but yeah, no, I haven't seen any data on that. I'm just speculating. So
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just things I'm thinking of that, are we, because now let me ask you this: does Iowa have CWD?
I believe they do. Yes.
Okay, and Ohio does as well.
Yes.
Okay, and
Um,
that's what's interesting to me is Ohio still. That's why it's so like I have so many thoughts on it because I know we mentioned earlier that they're not talking about banning baiting or anything like that. And I look at Ohio as an example, like they still have it, they still bait. And the only reason I am even worried about it is because, if you basically right now, if you're not putting food in our area, if you're not putting food out, the neighbor is, and then you're not going to even see anything. And so like as much as I don't like spending, 60, 70 bucks on feed every single week when it's deer season, kind of have to, unless you're just going to go hunt public land. So when I heard about all this, I told my wife, I was like, hey, we have CWD in Georgia now. I was like, you might see me start saving some money if they ban baiting. And she was happy about it. I'm like, all right, don't get too excited. I was like, because we don't need it to get any more than it is. But it's just interesting because I want the healthiest deer herd that we can possibly have. And seriously, man, you have lit a fire under me to try and do everything I can to, granted, it's nowhere near us. It's probably like 300 miles away from us, but deer move, and we have captive deer, organizations around here. I mean, it's who knows what's going on with that.
I mean, look, the nice thing is that the solution for hunters is keep hunting and keep
Mm-hmm.
harvesting deer. We can do that. Don't tune out and don't ignore it. Just get engaged. Now, there are going to be some, you know, changes in your practices and traditions if you hunt in one of these zones that, can be a little bit bothersome, like not being able to transport a carcass maybe out of county where you used to go to your favorite processor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like testing and things like that. There are some little, inconveniences that are part of the process, but in the end, hunting goes on, and the solution is to keep hunting and keep harvesting deer. What's wrong with that? So yeah,
Not a thing.
it's, we can live with it, we can manage it, and particularly understanding that as engaged hunters, as involved hunters, we're doing the best thing we can to help keep the disease at a very low infection rate.
Gotcha. Well, I know I'm going to do my part. I already said I'm killing more does next year. So I mean, if by some terrible turn of events we start seeing it, then more does will die. I'm
Hey, doe
just going to do
harvest
that
is
anyway.
always a good thing. I don't care, disease or
Yeah.
not. Doe
Yeah.
harvest is always a good thing. It ensures healthy populations, more nutrition for bucks. It makes your rut more intense. So yeah, doe harvest is always a good thing.
Well, that is number one on the checklist this year. One thing I want to ask you before we wrap this up, totally unrelated, but it has something to do with regulations and law changes and all that other stuff. And I'm just curious on your opinion. Um, I have been saying now because I think T-Bone mentioned it a year or two ago about a velvet season, kind of like how Tennessee does. Do you see a benefit in that? Because I love me a good velvet buck, and I would be more than happy to go, 3 weeks early on a weekend, hunt 3 days, and then wait 2 weeks and get into deer season. I mean, is that something that would actually be beneficial to us here, or do you think it's kind of good where we're at?
From a just a herd management standpoint, I don't really think that there's a need for it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it would necessarily hurt anything really. We've got so much opportunity already in Georgia, 3 months of deer hunting or more, and in some counties where they have extended seasons, more than that. So, um, you know, I don't know. I guess I hadn't had that asked of me before, and I'm not really sure. We hunt in Southeast Georgia. It's already hot
Super.
enough in
Yeah.
mid-September when bow season opens. I don't know that I want to hunt any earlier. But, if given that there's probably no biological impact at all on the deer herd in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
if Georgia hunters, and the majority of Georgia hunters said we want this, and the DNR was okay with going along with that, I don't really see a problem with it. So,
I'm just curious the impact that Tennessee has seen by doing that. You know,
yeah.
that's I haven't ever asked anybody about it. I haven't looked into it. I think what it is I just hate how like long our off season is.
Yeah.
I just want to get out there, man. Like I was telling a buddy of mine, right now is the most depressing time of the year for me. Because yeah, you could go put food out, you can go scout, you can do this, you can do that. Our bucks aren't fully shedding yet. I have nothing to do. Like I literally have nothing to do. I get home, I shoot my bow, and that's it. I mean, it's just I don't know. I've got depression a little bit, so if there's
You
any
know,
way to get out there earlier, it'd be great.
I'm
But
a fan of more opportunity. If it doesn't mean, a biological impact that we don't
yeah,
want to see with the deer population, like adding crossbows during bow season. I think that's great. It adds opportunity. It
hmm
allows for people like my dad, who's 81, who has been a bow hunter since the 60s, but he can't draw a bow anymore.
hmm
And so he hunts with a crossbow. It allows him, to remain engaged and active as a deer hunter. It's opportunity for some people that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm a fan of, you know, seasons and regulations and special weapons and things like that that allow greater opportunity, like the early seasons for youth. The early opening days for young hunters. Again, that's opportunity. I like those things. And as long as it's not something that, just like, adding crossbows to bow season has not altered the deer harvest whatsoever. There's no
yeah,
change whatsoever in the number or sex of deer being harvested because of adding that opportunity. So I'm for it.
gotcha. So equal rights hunting, basically, which
Right.
I'm cool with it. Like that's one of the only times I would throw that whole thing in there. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's just I really didn't think that we would end up getting it, and it's I know it's in its baby stages. I know that CWD is it is more important to me now than it was before we did this. Honestly, I'm going to be following it very tightly, and I think everyone that's listening needs to do the same thing because we don't want our state to be like Wisconsin. And I hate to throw them
Yeah.
under the bus, but we don't want that. I mean,
Look, life goes on. Life's going to go on. A year or two from now, it won't be as much, on your mind as it is right now because
yeah,
this news is still fresh. We don't need to forget about it. We need to follow the regulations and do what we all need to do to help. But don't let it worry you too much. It's not something to panic about. We're the 36th state to find it. 35 other states found it before we did, many of them years ago. And
yeah,
they've been dealing with it. They've been handling it in many cases. Some, had more unfortunate situations like finding it too late and had been there a long time, like Tennessee and Arkansas. Others were like us and hopefully found it early. Or I say like us, I hope we found it early. We don't know yet, but others found it early and they're managing it. And life goes on in those areas. Hunting goes on. They're, nice, killing some nice deer in those areas. So, my boss, Nick Penizzato, who's CEO of NDA, lives in Pennsylvania and a few years ago bought land in a known CWD zone to hunt in
hmm.
and wondered, was he making a mistake? He's enjoyed it. He's loved it. It's not a mistake. It turned out to be a great thing. So life goes on in with CWD.
Well, Lindsay, that was a great way to end this on a positive note. I started feeling myself go down that depression rabbit hole, like, oh, it's the end of the deer season and all that. So I'm glad you pulled me out of it, man. Well, look, I guess before we wrap it up, tell everybody where they can find you. You mentioned NDA. I know you're affiliate or you're working with them. But yeah, where can everybody find you if they have questions?
Yeah, so I'm with the National Deer Association. Deerassociation.com is the website. Go look us up. Sign up for our free newsletter. If you join as a free basic member, you get our newsletter every Thursday morning. Lots of deer articles, lots of information. We have a Age This Buck every week where readers send in a trail camera photo of a buck and everybody gets to vote on how old they think it is. And then we provide our opinion on what we think the age is. So it's a pretty fun feature of the newsletter every week. You can sign up for that free at deerassociation.com. We're on all the social media at Deer Association. So look us up there. Instagram, Facebook. We're on TikTok as well, YouTube. So go find us. And yeah, we love learning about deer. We love teaching about deer,
Mhm.
and would love to have your audience follow along.
Well, I probably have about 15 to 20 photos that I'm going to be sending in that newsletter now because I have no idea how old these deer are. I had 6 shooters on one spot last year, and I kept telling everybody, "Oh, I think this one's 3.5, but he's really nice. I think this one's 5. This one might be 6." I got one who's got an eye that doesn't even work. I named him Deadeye because why not, right?
Yeah.
And he looks to be like 6, but his rack doesn't show it. So huge body deer, probably a 110, 115, which for Georgia is amazing in my opinion. But awesome, dude. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for clearing the air. I definitely feel a lot better about it now, more hopeful than I was. And we need to do this again. We don't need to wait another year. That's my fault. I'm sorry about that. But I do want to keep up with this with you. If any new news comes out or if you hear anything and I need to maybe announce it on here or talk about it on here, I'd be more than happy to, because I do want to be involved with it. Like if it turns into something where they're saying, all right, hunters, people in the industry, whatever, we need your involvement, I'm right there. So whatever you guys need, you just let me know. But I do appreciate you coming on, man, for real. I think
Thanks for having me, Eric. Look, thanks for having me to talk about this because, it's kind of a subject that a lot of podcasters don't go to. They just want to, let's just keep talking about, how to kill big bucks and how to plant food plots and things like that, happy subjects. Many won't go here. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of get some facts out there about CWD. It's one of our priorities.
Yeah. I just want to talk about the current stuff that's happening. And this is potentially a big, big thing that we're going to be dealing with. So I figured it was a perfect fit. And you did a great job on the episode we did last year. So I knew this one was going to be great. So I had a good time, man. I really appreciate it. And like I said, thank you for, kind of setting everything straight. I don't think it's conspiracy anymore. I did a little bit in the beginning, but I don't anymore. So I'm hopeful for the future. I really hope that we can catch it earlier, that we did catch it early, and it's just going to be a one and done or maybe 2 or 3, and then that's it. So
yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Eric. Have a good evening.
You too, man.